All right, greetings everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Seen on the Small Screen, a podcast devoted to the discussion of television cinema films, both past and present. I am one of your hosts. My name is Jake. Glad to be with you.
My name's Becky. Good to be here.
And hey, here we are once again.
Yes, and today we are going to be discussing the Netflix movie Benji. That is right. It is a movie that is either a remake or a reboot of the Benji movies from the 1970s. There is some debate about whether or not it is a remake or a reboot, and we will be discussing that and trying to decide which we would consider it. I don't know.
Yes, this has actually been the product of a lot of discussion. If we are going by technical terms, when you talk about reboots, specifically, you're talking about a rebranding, an entire rebranding of an existing IP intellectual property. So in this case, it would be something where it's like you take a movie and its characters, but you essentially create an entire new story and or story arc, I guess, that has absolutely nothing to do with the original source material, or there are some cases where you very loosely take some source material, not too much, because if you do take too much, then you get into remake territory, which by itself is simply a retelling of the original story. So you're not doing a whole lot to change what was originally told. I mean, there may be a few tweaks here and there because, with the passing of years and whatnot. So some situations or lines that may have been appropriate a couple of decades ago and no longer hold the same weight in the present time. And so, it makes sense to go in and brush up the dialogue, add in some new scenarios, and, there you go. So the question that we are going to be answering today is, what category does this particular TV movie fall under? Now, we say TV movie. By all technicalities, this was a movie that appeared on Netflix. It wasn't on network television. However, due to the fact that it was on Netflix, it wouldn't have had it didn't have anything beyond just that streaming service.
It was never made for a theatrical release. And since that's the big thing that we focus on, is it's not made for a theatrical release. Fair enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes it fair game. So that's why we chose it. All right, so without further ado, we will go ahead and dive in. However, very quickly, before we do, again, this is just another reminder to any who may be listening to this for the first time, that the reviews that we do on this show are not spoiler-free in any sense of the phrase.
No, do not listen to this thinking that we're not going to give stuff away, because we will give away everything.
So if this is something that isn't quite what you're looking for, we understand. If you want to, feel free to pause this, go to Netflix, because it's everywhere. Feel free to watch the movie, and you can hit play again. Or if you're the kind of person that just doesn't care about spoilers, then continue listening. There will be spoilers.
Yes,
and that's a spoiler.
Friday, 8 is Enough's Adam Rich and Benji have a surprise.
Action!
It's a behind-the-scenes look at Benji at work.
So we start off with the typical hyper-depressing scene that Disney and Benji movies can get away with.
So we begin. A dark alley. A nondescript night. A car pulls up in front of said alley. Who is this individual? It's a dog catcher.
We see a whole bunch of dogs. We see a big mama dog and a whole bunch of little puppy dogs. And the dog catcher comes along and snatches up the mama dog and snatches up all the little puppy dogs, puts them into his truck, and starts to drive away, at which point in time we see Benji as the dog catcher is driving away, Benji somehow was able to hide from the dog catcher and not get caught.
Yes, he's all by his lonesome self. So the thing I liked about this scene was the dog catcher, when he was rounding up dogs, he of course used on Benji's mother the classic long pole with a
retractable wire noose.
Yes, with a noose attached to it. For the puppies, though, apparently this particular dog catcher must have just recently come from his weekly gladiatorial class, because he decided just to toss a net on the puppies. So I don't know if that's part of the standard dog catcher's equipment, but that's what he had on hand. Anyway, just a fun little aside.
Well, and I thought that was just a perfect beginning to a Benji movie, because, again, Benji movies can get away with being as depressing as you can possibly get. Kind of like Disney movies. They can be depressing as all get out.
Yep, and so Benji hangs his collar very close to so many other Disney characters. We could even throw in superheroes as well into that classification.
Well, and if you think about it, Benji is kind of a Disney character crossed with a superhero.
It is, and actually, listener, as we get into the particulars of this movie, you are going to see that Benji is able to do some pretty crazy stuff. But we'll get to that in just a little bit. So we have Benji. He is actually not even named at this point. He's technically just a dog. But
we know it's Benji.
Yes, because that's what the title is. So you can assume. Even someone who is not familiar with the franchise, it's more than likely that's who we're dealing with.
So, Benji has now lost his parent.
Oh, and by the way, if you were thinking like I was thinking when I saw this movie, since they had put all this time into explaining how Benji's family had been abducted by the evil dog catcher, in my brain, well, maybe it would stand to reason that the rest of the movie might be devoted to Benji being reunited. Maybe not with his entire family, but I don't know, maybe someone. And
no, you don't see them ever again.
Yeah,
So you're left wondering exactly what would have happened to them, which is depressing because we know what tends to happen to dogs when they're caught and taken to an animal shelter, unless it happens to be a no-kill shelter.
Hey, you guys, look. Poor Nutsy is taking the long walk.
But they don't address that in any way.
And since the opening sequence of the movie basically takes Benji from puppyhood to adulthood, we can only assume that, oh man, I truly want to be an optimist here.
We want to say, for all the kids out there, that Benji's mom and his brothers and sisters were all adopted into really loving families.
Or they spent the rest of their lives living happily on a puppy farm somewhere. Yes.
That being said...
That, by the way, was only the opening few minutes of the film. So we have a growing up montage, which doesn't do much other than establish that Benji walks around a lot.
He walks down the street through every possible season. So you get a montage.
And after the montage, you get Benji hopping into the back of a pickup truck, and said pickup truck drives from, I'm guessing, the bayou, because the city they wind up in is New Orleans.
Yeah, they end up in New Orleans, and then the guys moving the stuff out of the truck, they do not realize that they have had a dog stow away in the truck until they're moving stuff out, or after they've moved stuff out, and then the dog jumps out of the furniture that they have just moved out of the truck. We then have a quick cut from Benji to the boy that we know that Benji will obviously befriend. If you're familiar with the Benji movies, then you know that he is going to be befriending a human.
Yes.
of some sort.
And if you're wondering if that's the case here, and then you would be right. We meet Carter, who, in the first 30 seconds of his appearance, we learned that he has a problem with the bully who is angry that his homework didn't get done. Standard, typical, how are we going to introduce this character? And we don't really have a whole lot of time to establish who he's about, so we'll just throw him into a very stereotypical situation that happens at school.
Yes, but we're not going to fool ourselves into thinking that this bully is going to make another appearance in the movie at all, because he's vaguely referenced, but that's it. He doesn't show up in the movie for the rest of the movie at all.
So again, another side character that just kind of appears once and then sort of gets snubbed.
Correct. But then we're quickly back with Benji. And Benji is doing his typical dog thing, and the thing that he would have learned how to do in order to survive by himself on the streets, where he's begging for food, he's rummaging things out of the garbage, he steals food from street vendors, and then goes down the street, goes behind fences and back alleys, and ends up running into a bigger dog that we will find out. We will actually have another character show up in this movie. A side character. The dog will show up at some point. So, we will.
Not a human, mind you. This is a dog. So,
yes.
Because this is a movie about dogs.
Mm-hmm. And then, then we end up with Benji coming face to face with Carter. They're not face to face. They're not right next to each other. They're down the street from each other, and then they stop and stare into each other's eyes.
Yeah, I have to admit, this was one of those weird moments during this movie. I mean, the movie itself, pretty down to earth, a little melodramatic, but there were just these instances where Benji would make eye contact with a human, and it would be they'd do a close-up of each other's eyes. So the camera gets a close-up of Benji, and then you could just see the color saturation filter being turned up to a ridiculously high setting, because Benji is lit up like some kind of divine canine angelic being. I mean, it's very, very strange. And then he vanishes as if he wasn't there.
Yes. Because after their psychic Lassie moment, even though they weren't trying to communicate anything to each other individually, they were still communicating to each other. After Benji and Carter have had this serendipitous telepathic connection, he then ends up in a crawl space where Carter finds him and tries to get him to come out, but then decides that he's going to take fresh strawberries that somehow have lasted throughout his entire day at school in his coat pocket and use those to entice the dog to come out of the hole.
And that got me to thinking, strawberries, that's an interesting choice of food to give to a dog, because in the movie, there's a bit of hesitation, but eventually, one by one, the strawberries disappear as Benji accepts them. But still, that question nagged in my mind. Do dogs or can dogs eat strawberries? So, while we were watching the movie, I decided to open up Madam Google and see what the Grand Oracle had to say on the subject. And what I found was, yes, actually, dogs can in fact eat strawberries. According to what I read, strawberries are full of healthy nutrients that are good for dogs, but like any good thing, they are best enjoyed in moderation. They're not toxic or poisonous to dogs, but they do contain sugar, and too many can cause an upset stomach.
So that being said, the number of strawberries that Carter feeds to Benji throughout this movie kind of leads me to believe that Benji might not have had a super happy tummy at night. But that's beside the point. I personally wouldn't have thought, hey, here, let me put strawberries out to entice this dog to follow me, but okay.
If it were me, I would have just done the standard thing and, offered him a steak or two. I mean, I'm pretty sure that would have made me a friend for life in Benji's case.
Right.
Strawberries.
But
sure.
Benji loves the strawberries, and then he ends up following Carter to meet up with his sister, and they get onto a streetcar where we don't actually see Benji get onto the streetcar. The streetcar has the one door in the front where the driver is right next to, but then we see it driving away, and we see Benji in the back of the streetcar.
Mind you, in the very last shot that Benji was in, he was actually on the street corner watching what the kids were doing. And then in the next shot, he is just in the streetcar. And nobody seems to know he's there.
And so this is where you kind of wonder, what superpower does Benji have? Because it's either teleportation, or he has the ability to jump extremely high, because the window to that streetcar was pretty high compared to Benji as far as dog size.
But whatever the reason, Benji is on the streetcar, following the children home. The kids arrive at home. Home is a large apartment building. And we know that it is an apartment building because the kids go up to, I'd say it's the second floor.
Yeah, I think it's a second floor apartment.
And here we see Benji's second superpower come into play, because in spite of the fact that it's a building and the kids visibly go through a door and out of sight, Benji knows not only the exact window that he needs to access in order to make himself known in said apartment, he also knows how to set up the best way to describe it. He basically sets up a Rube Goldberg machine of boxes and a dumpster and boards connected to a few air conditioning units that get him to go from the street level where he's at to the window that belongs to the children. All this time knowing exactly where to go, by the way.
And again, we say this is kind of one of Benji's superpowers, because we know that dogs have a fantastic sense of smell, and they can usually follow a trail really easily. But the trail of the kids went through the door. And yes, he could probably smell the kids through a window, but again, you've got Benji setting up his stairs / Rube Goldberg to be able to get into this window. So there's the superpower of knowing exactly where the kids were at. That one can kind of be explained by the sense of smell, but his ability to move things around and set up this elaborate path to get into the window is a Benji superpower.
So yes, he catches the obvious attention of the children who take him in, and then we get a bit of a montage where Benji essentially gets all of the Rick Grime off of him. Carl! Pun there from The Walking Dead. And then we have the classic conversation that any good kids have once they've adopted a stray. Should we tell mom about it?
Yes, and the answer to that is obviously no, because we learned that the dad, for whatever reason, is not around. They don't exactly explain why. He's just not around. There are certain things that lead you to believe that the dad maybe has passed on. We'll talk about some of those a little bit later. Basically, they just discuss, should we tell mom? And the answer is no, because that's going to be too stressful for her. She doesn't want to have a dog. She's going to say no. Oh, but dad would say yes. You can fill in the rest of that conversation pretty easily.
Yeah.
But throughout part of this conversation, they also end up giving Benji his name.
They do.
which we all know that is the kiss of death, meaning that they're going to form an emotional attachment. So, when the mom eventually does find out about it, because typical movie fashion, she starts off the evening being completely clueless to the fact that there is a dog now in the apartment that is not a huge apartment anyway.
Mind you, she's cooking dinner, and Benji manages to not only sneak into the kitchen, but he also manages to get a box of honeycomb stuck on his head.
Honeycomb, me one, honeycomb!
And in comical fashion, he just kind of wanders out of the kitchen. And of course, the kids are doing every misdirection trick in the book they can think of. And the mom never figures out that Benji's in the room. And yeah, it's yes.
To give this movie some credit, though, I will say that at least the mom was growing suspicious. She didn't know exactly what she was suspicious of, but she was growing suspicious that the kids were hiding something, which, quite frankly, in a lot of movies nowadays where the kids just happen to be, it's this, parents are a completely clueless group, then yes, then that's where this movie does do something really well, because the mother actually is with it enough to start being suspicious of their behavior. But when mom does find out, she flat out says, no, we can't have a dog. Carter is forced to put Benji out into the rain. And again, you feel just bad for Benji and the kid. And it's a typical Benji movie. So you have to have some high points interspersed with a whole bunch of really depressing sadness.
A lot of low points. And this one is no exception, because after you have the happy, I'm getting the dirt cleaned off of me happy montage, then you have the sad, I'm getting wet because it's still raining outside, but I've been rejected, so I must walk sadly through the rain.
I experienced the small taste of love, and now I must walk through the rain in sadness and go sleep in a park.
Benji's got the blues so bad, man. Got the blues. Man, this movie did give me the blues in a few spots.
Should have a harmonica to play the blues at this point. So, the next day, we see the kids who, right after school, we see them going into a pawn shop. You have seen them go into this pawn shop before. The day before, they went in to pay money to try to buy back a watch from their father that their mother had to sell for the money. So they're trying to buy it back little by little. They go into this pawn shop again because, they've had an argument with their mother. And so, we're going to show her, we're just going to get our money back, and then they can sell that watch and we'll never see it again. But they walk in and there happens to be a robbery taking place by some guys who are in masks. That, how do we describe those masks?
They had seen the movie The Purge and decided, hey, creepy masks are the way to go. Because these masks, they're pretty creepy.
Creepy masks without any real details to the mask. It's literally just a white mask with large eye holes and mouth holes cut out. And that's it. So, pretty creepy looking. But the kids just happen to walk in at a very bad time. So, through a series of events, the kids end up getting shoved into the robbers' vans.
Which is also creepy.
Yeah, which is also creepy.
Like, picture your classic creepy 1970s van that you would never want to get into. And that pretty much sums it up.
You kind of expect to get in and see shag carpeting and, Christmas lights strung around it. That kind of a van. Except for there's none of that. It's just an empty van. Empty other than the stuff that the robbers have taken from this pawn shop. As the kids are being forced into this van, Benji just happened to be there because...
Well, when you're a dog on the skids, you can pretty much be anywhere you want.
You can be anywhere you want.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Especially when it's convenient to the plot.
And then, again, convenient to the plot, Carter finds a bag of strawberries that just happened to be in this van, and because he knows that Benji loves strawberries, he starts leaving a trail of strawberries for Benji to follow. Which is really odd because these robbers, they actually are like flooring it because they can see Benji in the rear view mirrors.
And for some reason that freaks them out.
It freaks them out that there is this little dog
chasing them. Which I thought was kind of funny. I mean, yes, you could say, oh, well, they were just, they're still feeling the endorphin highs from just having held up a pawn shop. Yeah, that's definitely true. But every so often they would just be looking out the window and they'd just be like, oh, man, we gotta go faster. You gotta floor it. I mean, they never said, oh, there's a dog out there. But
it was really like legitimately they might as well have had a police officer running after them. Now, given Benji's superpowers, that is true, but they didn't have a way to know this at this point.
And I might add that even topping speeds that, well, your typical 70s creepy van can go, well, 35 miles an hour, let's say. Yeah, Benji was pretty much able to keep pace with it until he rounds a corner and gets surrounded by a bunch of skeletons that reminded me of the costumes that the Cobra Kai guys wore in the original Karate Kid.
There's no mercy in this dojo!
So because of that little band, Benji, sadly, he loses the trail.
Yes.
But
don't you fear.
Because when he's trying desperately, and then out of the corner of his eye, he spies a strawberry, and he continues the chase.
Yes, because again, we know that Benji loves strawberries, and so he is going to follow. And he follows them to the bad guy's hideout, where he proves, again, his superpowers by outsmarting the thieves. The thieves see the dog come along, and they're like, oh my gosh, that's the dog that was chasing us. And because I'm pretty sure that they thought that the dog was going to be able to testify in court against them to identify them. So they were thoroughly scared of this dog. And they started chasing him around the hideout, but Benji outsmarts them because he traps one of them in an abandoned school bus, and then the other one gets trapped in a shed.
Well, we should also mention here that the Crooks have a dog of their own, a gigantic, mean-looking Rottweiler who gives chase to Benji. Oh, this Rottweiler is also intimidating because he's blind in one eye. So Rottweiler plus blind in one eye equals I'm a mean dog.
Yes.
But Benji is able to get the best of him by tricking him into running into a pipe that is big enough for Benji to fit through, not big enough for a Rottweiler.
Yes. And so then, we see Benji. He knows that there's some bad stuff that he's got to fix. And so he goes back to the pawn shop where the pawn shop owner has been tied up. We see more of Benji's superpowers because he moves a chair to the door to the door of the pawn shop where the owner has been tied up.
Now, Becky, at this point in the show, can we just say that Benji, aside from everything else, he's pretty much MacGyver?
He kind of is.
The MacGyver of dogs.
Oh, yeah. He is the dog MacGyver.
Because, not only does he know exactly what a lock is, he is able to, when he isn't able to obviously get the key into the lock because it's too high up for a dog his size, he figures out, hey, I just need to push this chair up against the door, and then I can get up to the lock and having with the key in my mouth, put it in there and turn it so that it clicks open, and there you go. Oh, and then I can untie the pawn shop owner who is tied up in a chair. Only the MacGyver of dogs could accomplish such a feat.
Yeah, it's quite impressive that Benji is able to do that. So, like I said, he's either got superpowers or he is the MacGyver of dogs. But, pawn shop owner calls the police. Benji is there. Oddly, the pawn shop owner does very little to try to prove to the police that Benji is valuable because he was the one who managed to save him. But maybe that part wasn't important at this point. Okay, fair enough. Benji comes along when the police are there. And then he basically brings the mask that was left behind to the police to get their attention because, oh, it's a clue. And then in Lassie fashion, manages to convince police officer, pawn shop owner, and the kid's mother.
Who has also shown up at this point.
Who has also shown up because she's a paramedic, so it was convenient for the plot for her to be able to be there.
Absolutely.
And so he's able to convince these three people in very Lassie fashion by barking at them nonstop and running and barking and running and barking that they needed to follow him. And so they follow him in their police car to this hideout because that's the Lassie fashion. Timmy is caught in the bad guy's hideout. Wait. No, there's no well there.
Sadly, though, tragedy strikes because Benji leads the cops and the kid's mother to the hideout. However, when they get to the house, there's no one there. And so the cops are obviously frustrated. The mother is obviously frustrated. And she decides to take all of her anger out on Benji.
And that's where we see the stereotypical scene of, go away, I don't want to have anything to do with you, you're not a part of my family.
Go on, go! Listen to me! Go! Get out of here! Go!
However, I have to say, what is the biggest crime that's been committed here? It's that Benji wasted a police officer's time.
Yep. But never fear, because Benji is not giving up on this. Trying so hard to figure out what exactly can be done. And then, as we mentioned earlier, there is another dog in this particular movie. This dog does not ever get a specific name. So we can call this dog Hooch, because this dog works with Benji to solve this particular crime. Works together.
Yes. So why does Benji need a partner in this case? Because he realizes, hey, this stray dog I ran into has a much finer sense of smell than I do. So maybe this dog can figure out where the crooks managed to go.
Not to mention, this dog is bigger than me and is bigger than the Rottweiler. So might be able to help offer some backup.
And
we obviously never heard this being said because they're dogs, but you can kind of see those wheels turning.
Mm-hmm. And sure enough, using the lure of hot dogs, get it? Hot. Yeah, dogs. They're hot dogs. Yeah, so anyway, he uses the lure of fast food to get the black shaggy dog, Hooch, to follow him to the crook's hideout. And sure enough, they find that there is a basement that was overlooked. They discover it is a basement, and not only a basement, but it is a basement that apparently has a subterranean passage. So what does this mean? It means they're in a D&D dungeon, technically. The way these things go is when you're in a basement and you find out there's a secret passage that leads you somewhere, it's a D&D dungeon. Okay, and sure enough, this subterranean passage is exactly the right track, because in the next scene we see that the crooks have established a new hideout, which is a shady-looking building that's kind of next to the river.
Yes. And we do get to see Benji and Hooch working together because they run into Roddy, the Rottweiler.
So this dog is pretty much like the dogs from A Christmas Story. Because they're mean, they're not mean, but they're big and they run around and they're a bit of an annoyance.
Yes, but they're also stupid. And we know that because Benji and Hooch, then lead Roddy on a wild goose chase, convincing Roddy and tricking Roddy, the Rottweiler, into chasing Benji, where Benji then dodges and avoids and manages to trick the Rottweiler into falling into the river, where he then comes out the other side and runs directly into Hooch.
And then Hooch, because he's such an overpowering presence standing on the riverbank, the Bupkis Rottweiler has no choice but to submit, and that's the end of him. In fact, for some reason, his attitude then changes and he actively starts chasing down the crooks at this point. The Rottweiler does.
We're not sure exactly what doggy communication happened there, but that is what happened. And that way Benji can do his thing.
Which thing is to save the children, because while all this has been going down, the police have picked up the trail again and are actually on the scene while this is happening. However, they're too busy catching the crooks and don't realize that one of the crooks has stowed the children away on a boat and is planning to make his getaway, because an alarm sounds when the cops arrive, and that freaks everyone out. And the guy who is driving the boat is like, crap, I'm a kidnapper. I'm going to do the next sensible thing and try to drive the boat away. Oh, by the way, my mooring lines are still attached.
Yes, because I'm in such a hurry I can't undo the mooring lines.
But that's a good thing for Benji, because he uses the mooring lines as a quick way to get across the boat. And there he faces one of the crooks, who almost takes on the persona of a James Bond villain by just saying, won't you ever quit? You're such a thorn in my side, you furry dog.
Choose your next witticism carefully, Mr. Bond. It may be your last.
Okay, so Benji gets into a tussle with the bad guys. Well, okay, with one of the bad guys, because one of the bad guys, kind of the one that you're assuming is the leader of this pack, of this group, he gets captured by the police on land. But then the other bad guy, the other robber, is on the boat with the kids and the boat driver, taking them away to where we're assuming that it's human trafficking.
Yeah, I have to admit, this was a point that the movie took a really dark turn for me.
Very, very dark. Even for Benji. I mean, Benji has depressing moments. This was a dark moment.
I mean, if all this stuff didn't happen the way that it was, kids are, Anyway, sorry, we're not going to go there.
Because that's not what happened.
Exactly.
Because Benji comes along, saves the day. Benji gets into a tussle with the robber that is on the boat. In the middle of this tussle, Benji ends up knocking the bad guy off balance, and he falls into the water. But Benji, unfortunately, gets knocked into the side of the cabin, into the wall, and gets knocked out.
Okay, so the kids, meanwhile, are being held by the driver, the captain of the small little boat tug, who they manage to overpower by Carter, who has been kind of bullied around this entire movie, finally decides to grow a pair and knocks out the tugboat captain with a fire extinguisher. And they escape and run into the police, who apprehend the rest of the crooks. However, they have discovered that all is not well with Benji. He has been knocked out and is apparently lifeless. And so they and their mother carry the poor dog to a small clearing in the grass. And there you have one of those climactic moments. Will Benji live? Or after having accomplished so much, will he go the way of a dog's purpose? And fortunately, though this movie had a lot of dark points, that was one line that they didn't actually cross, because true to fashion, all Benji really needed was a gentle little kiss of warmth and tenderness upon his head. And suddenly his eyes opened up and he was okay. And the kids were happy and the mother was happy and Benji was happy.
And the macho police officer who was watching all of this take place was happy as well.
And cried like a baby.
And yes.
It's okay. I'd be lying if I said here that I wasn't shedding a tear or two. It was a very emotional moment.
Then, as we know that the movie has ended happily.
However, there was one more curveball the movie saw fit to throw at us. Because you find out at the end of all of this, the dog that Benji has been running around with this whole time, Hooch, is not in fact a boy. It was a girl.
So does that mean we have to change her name to Hoochie?
No, we'll stick with Hooch.
Okay.
Because it's a family film.
Fair enough.
So we get an epilogue where Benji and female Hooch are making some kind of a love connection, I guess.
But not in the dirty way that you're thinking.
Oh, yes.
They become pals. They run around and play in the field in rom-com-esque happily ever after montage fashion.
Yes. So, Benji, the only thing I'd say consider is that this dog is 5 times your size, and she's a different breed. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It can be overcome. Just bear it in mind for the future, maybe.
But it's a family movie, so we don't have to think about that.
No, not really. And that takes us to the very end. So, I think...
At the end, though, we do have to include the fact that Carter, Frankie, and their mom have now decided that Benji is a part of the family, and he has a forever home.
Yes.
That is the only way that they can get their true happy ever after. So that brings us to the end of this. So now, at the beginning, we mentioned that we would broach the subject of, is this a reboot or is this a remake?
Want me to start?
Yes.
Okay. So, in my humble opinion, I'm going to classify this one as a remake because this movie, while it did have a few scenes that were new, and by scenes, I'm talking about all of the scenes where it was just Benji on his own interacting with other dogs, and all of the escapades that he got into in the city, and just kind of out by himself. All of those things were new for the movie. However, the main plot involving Benji saving the children from the crooks was actually the same plot that was used in the 1974 film of the same name, Benji. Now, in the 1974 version, the kidnapping of the children was done under slightly different circumstances. The children were kidnapped by crooks because they wanted ransom money from the children's father, who was a wealthy doctor in the film. And so that's kind of the plot device that gets things going. But everything that happens afterwards pretty much goes down in the exact same fashion. Benji, wanting a home, risks everything, including his life, to save the children and to lead the father and the police to the spot where the crook's hideout is, which he does. And that's the way that that movie ends. So in that respect, it is actually like the original movie, again, titled Benji. And so that's why, in my opinion, it is a remake, because it does follow, at least in that vein, follows the plot of the original film.
Yes, and I am definitely going to agree with you on that, because it's a remake, because it takes the same basic high points of the entire plot line, and it just follows it all the way through. It's the same premise, it's the same plot line. It follows it 100% of the way through. Granted, it's not a blow-for-blow, scene-for-scene remake of the movie. And that means that, to me, that means that it's a remake. I know that there are some websites that would count it as a reboot because it's trying to reestablish and reimagine the entire movie series, the movie franchise. But it doesn't really reimagine anything. It modernizes it.
Yeah. Just to end, did we like this movie, and would we recommend it?
I won't say that I didn't like it. I'm not huge on movies that make me want to cry, just because I don't like movies that are sad very much. I'm very, very, very picky about any movie that is going to be sad. However, that being said, if you have kids, this is a great movie for them because they will be getting emotionally invested in it, especially if they like animals, if they like dogs. It's a great movie for kids. It is a family movie. It's totally safe and friendly. And I think the kids would enjoy it. But again, you know your kids. And so you've got to know if your kid likes watching things that are sad and that make them cry, but end happy. If they like the movie Up, they'll probably like this. I would recommend it as a family movie if you know that your kids are going to like animal type movies.
Okay, cool. Oddly enough, I kind of had the same thought process as you did on this one. I'm going to start my thoughts by saying this, though, that Benji, as far as movies go, it's kind of like watching a Godzilla movie. Now, I know this might seem a little out in left field, but just hear me out. So Benji is like watching a Godzilla movie because Benji, much like Godzilla, being the main character, the movie makers go out of their way to make a movie where a dog or an animal is a more interesting character than the rest of the characters in the film. Same thing with Godzilla. Godzilla, big, huge monster, goes through towns and cities, wrecks them. Godzilla is the main star of Godzilla movies. And so Benji, he kind of, the Benji movies follow this same formula in that they make the main character, in this case, a character who is not human, more appealing than the rest of the people that, or the rest of the cast that is in the film. And this is something that the Benji movies actually do incredibly well. And I think it is one of the reasons why they're so enduring. Because for me, myself, when I was watching this movie, I honestly would have been happy if it was just the Benji bits and not of the, the rest of the plot where he was entangled in the kidnapping of the children. And that was fine. For me, it was a little melodramatic. I would have been happy with a movie that was just 2 hours of just Benji doing stuff. Again, much like Godzilla, when you watch a Godzilla movie, all you want to see is Godzilla doing what Godzilla does best, wrecking cities, fighting other monsters, and blowing them up with his radioactive breath. That's the reason why you go to see a Godzilla movie. It's not to see the humans or whatever weak, thin plot the humans have to follow during the film. And so, yeah, Benji, pretty much, that was what the movie was for me. So as far as the recommendation, yes, I would recommend this, actually, going along with Becky. I would recommend this movie as a family flick. It is the kind of movie that you want to sit down with your kids and watch, because as an adult, your nostalgia for Benji, if you watched any of those films when you were younger, will kind of come flooding back to you, and your kids will be able to discover the reason why you kind of liked those movies as well when you were their age. Yeah, very satisfying conclusion. Was it melodramatic in places? Yes. Was the plot a little thin at times? Sure. Yeah, it was not a masterpiece. However, as Becky mentioned, it did a very good job of tugging at your heartstrings in just the right places. And for that, I think that as far as sentimental pieces go, it was pretty good.
Yeah. Well, and it's much like a Godzilla movie, you know what you're going to get when you go into it.
Exactly.
You know what you're getting when you go into a Benji movie. Much like you know what you're getting when you go into a Godzilla movie. You're getting two completely different things, but you know what you're getting when you go into it.
And yep, in this case, it followed the formula of the original movie and did a decent job, even if it was, for the most part, rehashing the plot of the original film.
Yes, but I think we're pretty much done.
Yep,
at this point. So
that's all I have. So yep, that brings us to the end of another episode of Seen on the Small Screen. Hope you've enjoyed listening to it. Hope you come back again and listen to more episodes. We will see you then. And until then, I've been Jake.
I'm Becky.
And we will see you at some future point. Safe travels, everyone.